So this chapter starts off with a detour, because we thought we were going to be getting into Yuji and Higuruma taking on Sukuna. But no, we're actually cutting away to what's going on in other areas of the Culling game, aside from that concentrated area, where Gojo died. And we're seeing another woman, sorcerer? And she kind of looks like Uro. And Uro, of course, is one of Akotsu's opponents from the Sendai colony. She had like that sky manipulation ability. I originally thought that this was her, but it is not. And it's possible that it's her sister or something, maybe. I mean, like I said, they look very similar. They're both reincarnated sorcerers, so that is possibly the case. But this sorcerer is not like Uro at all. She actually seems to be somewhat of a good guy, I guess. I mean, I guess the implication here is that she didn't want to kill people. And we see her running away from Kenjaku, because before the Gojo versus Sukuna fight started, Kenjaku said that he was going to go out to the Culling game and take out the rest of the lingering players, because he made a rule that the Culling game will end when only Megumi and Geto are the final players, since Kenjaku and Sukuna are in their bodies. And we're seeing that play out here with Kenjaku going after this, like I said, woman sorcerer, and I'll get into that. And he quickly takes her out with like this water curse spirit, just drowning her while it's floating. And Kenjaku reveals that he knows the location of most of the players, especially the ones that he brought into the game himself, because he placed cursed items in them, like the reincarnated sorcerers. So he'll always be able to track their location. I doubt that there is one in Sukuna, because, it would be in Yuji, which I guess, in theory, Kenjaku would have Yuji's location at all times, which is interesting. I'm sure that's going to come back into play, considering that it's being mentioned here, but I don't think this applies to Sukuna. And even if Sukuna had something in him somehow, he would just know about it and rip it out. And he also notes how it's interesting that everyone is staying inside of the colonies and not leaving, and he assumes it would be tiresome to get integrated into the new future society. And I guess that's possible, but it's honestly just more convenient for Gege to have all of the players still inside of the colonies, so he doesn't have to explain any unaccounted for players. Like, we don't want to run into a Hunter x Hunter Gyro situation here, or do we? But Hazunoki suddenly shows up. We haven't seen this guy in a very long time. He was like the right-hand man of Reggie, who was Megumi's original Culling Games opponent. And Kenjaku asks Hazunoki to be his friend. And Hazunoki says he's already dead, referring to the sorcerer that Kenjaku was talking to. And I don't know if this is like a typo or it's Gege straight up saying that this individual that we're seeing here is a man. I don't know if he is doing that or if this is a typo. It's probably just a typo, unless Gege is just trying to make a more interesting character here, I suppose. Why not? I mean, they have a couple panels of screen time and they die, so make a meal out of it. Kenjaku asks Hazunoki to be his friend, which is interesting. I guess he's getting bored or something. And he's like, yeah, you must not bore me and you must be equal to me, which obviously Hazunoki is not. And Hazunoki declines his offer, which was just nonsense anyway. It's not like he was literally going to become his friend. And then Kenjaku pulls out his phone and starts watching Gojo versus Sukuna. It is being live streamed by Meimei through her crows, and he sees the moment where Sukuna kills Gojo. And he says, I see an expansion of the technique's target. Ah, what a great expression. So what I think he's talking about here is Sukuna's expression of love. Because, we saw previously Sukuna and Kashimo had this afterlife conversation moment thing where they talked about sorcerers and their expression of love and whatnot. And Kenjaku understands that for sure. And he sees what Sukuna is doing. It's like, an artist giving props to another artist, I guess, or an athlete giving props to another one. And another interesting thing here is that Kenjaku and Hazunoki aren't plussed at all that Gojo has died. They're just yeah, business as usual. We knew Sukuna was going to win. And it's wow. It's surprising that they're so sure of this, because the audience definitely wasn't. But then he also says, then his next target is you, right, Kenjaku? And that makes me wonder, I do think Sukuna is eventually going to try to take out Kenjaku. I don't think they're friends. They just have a temporary alliance so that they could both achieve the goals that they want, I suppose. But they also have binding vows in place, so Sukuna just can't instantly kill Kenjaku. He needs to fulfill the binding vows and then he can kill him. Kenjaku then explains that the barrier techniques that he's using in the Culling game allows him to keep track of everyone in the colonies, essentially. Because with it, he's able to see the exact amount of cursed energy in the colonies. So if somebody leaves, then he'll know for sure because the cursed energy will decrease. And also he can share vision with his curses that he has through his curse spirit manipulation, which is awesome. He also mentions that Akotsu, the quote-unquote number 2, is especially easy to know, like if he's in a colony or not, since he has such a massive amount of cursed energy compared to everyone else. You know, calling him the number 2 here, I assume to Gojo, or when Gojo was number 1, which in real time in this chapter is just moments ago. And I also like that he's bringing up Akotsu here because I think that it's very likely Akotsu will be Kenjaku's final opponent. And I have a little juicy theory about that fight because it's possible that Kenjaku might take Rika from Akotsu with curse spirit manipulation. You know, it is mentioned in the Jujutsu Kaisen 0 movie and manga that that was what Geto's original plan was, and it never came to fruition. And usually when things are set up like that in battle manga, it's because they're going to happen. So it's possible that Gege was just doing an extremely slow burn here, and it ultimately winds up with Kenjaku taking Rika, not Geto. But, you know, that's a long time from now. We'll see what happens. He also mentions Maki, saying that it's still dangerous. You know, despite him knowing all of the information and everyone in these colonies, he still can't account for Maki, who can just invisibly, you know, to a sorcerer's perception, go through these colonies, and she can just sneak up on Kenjaku and just take his head off. Which, you know, very likely could happen to any of these sorcerers. Like, Maki is really dangerous right now if she gets the jump on you. And you're not Sukuna, of course. Obviously, Sukuna has no problems against her, we saw. But anyway, Kenjaku immediately tries to take out Hazanoki because he's thinking that he's stalling for time and waiting for help. And it's like, that is a possibility. And it probably is the case here. Hazanoki, to some extent, is working with the other sorcerers, maybe. There's a lot of stuff that's going on off panel, or at least it's implied, that we're not really privy to. And neither are the villains here, which makes it even more intriguing. And before Kenjaku takes out Hazanoki for good, he reveals what his plan is. And he says, I'm ending the culling game by killing all the players, and using that as a binding vow, I will activate a massive simultaneous merging with Tengen, who has become an ascended being. So yeah, we've heard this before. This is what Kenjaku's ultimate plan is. And I really don't think there's any secrets here, or at least what he's saying on the surface. Maybe the motives of why he is ultimately doing it and what it connects to with other people hasn't been revealed yet. But what he says with why he wants to do it, you know, finding out if something is interesting, I think that is the case because that is Kenjaku's character. Like, he's just I guess a mad scientist. And his ultimate goal is to just make this ultimate perfect life form art project thing. Maybe this is Kenjaku's expression of love. A plan that took 1,000 years to cultivate, only for him to end the world through his artistic expression of love using jujitsu. And I also think Sukuna is connected to this. Like, Kenjaku's plan to merge Japan with Tengen and create this big ultra god curse entity is probably for Sukuna to fight. I'm going to make another video about that, explaining it from start to finish, whenever Jujutsu Kaisen is on break again. But TLDR, I think that's what this is all for. And why Sukuna has been entertaining Kenjaku all this time. But we're coming into the end of the chapter here because after Kenjaku takes out Hazanoki, Takaba shows up. And this is super exciting because I've been waiting to see Takaba get his hands dirty. So when Kenjaku sees Takaba, he starts pondering like, wait, he's coming alone? Like, did he get here by Mei? Because Kenjaku also says in this chapter that Mei's brother probably has a spatial teleportation technique. Because during Shibuya, Mei and her brother go from like Shibuya to Malaysia instantly. So yeah. So it's possible that he just dropped off Takaba here. Because like I said before, there's some off-panel stuff going on. And it could relate back to that time skip that we had while Gojo was preparing for Sukuna. Maybe all of the plans were set up there and this was a part of it. It was like, yeah, we're going to have Takaba go against Kenjaku because I guess during that time they found out what Takaba's abilities were. And what his abilities are come through his curse technique, which is called Comedian. And when he comes up with something that he's certain will be funny, it becomes reality. It's a curse technique capable of opposing even Gojo. That's the narrator saying that, not me. But when it comes to his own curse technique, he's utterly clueless. So I assume that he's still unaware of what his curse technique is and how it fully works. But it seems like the others are aware of it. Because why else would they send him against Kenjaku unless he's coming here of his own volition and he's just randomly coming across the number 2 big bad? But it also is worrying Kenjaku. He's like, you know, it's creepy if they just chose him as the one to take him down. and he just instantly shoots like one of his curses at him. I think it's like the centipede one, thinking that he just took him out. And he's like, I don't even have interest in these awakened type of sorcerers, because Kenjaku only put these individuals in, like Higuruma, Takaba, to fill the player count. And I guess he just thought it would be fun to transfigure a human and see what kind of curse technique they would develop. Because clearly he doesn't know what Takaba has, but he does know what Higuruma has, deadly sentencing, which he says that he's interested in. I am too. I can't wait to see somebody on trial. But it turns out this didn't affect Takaba at all. I mean, yeah, it makes like a crater around him, but he comes out of it in comical fashion. And he's like, I'm not going to forgive you now. I'll slam you in jail. You better prepare yourself. And Kenjaku's just flabbergasted. He's like, this is a new sensation. It's not that my attack didn't affect him, but it like retroactively did not affect him, which means that Takaba's curse technique for sure has activated here. And as it says, when he comes up with something that he's certain will be funny, it becomes reality, meaning that he is literally manipulating reality. This is one of the craziest curse techniques in the series, if not the straight up craziest. It's so much different from the other ones that it's like an anomaly in the jujitsu world, I assume. Now, I don't know how far this could go. I don't know, like, if he just thinks it would be funny if he can create like a attack similar to Sukuna's and then just erase Kenjaku with it, or even just fire a beam from the sun to Kenjaku. Things like that. I don't know how far it can go, but I'm assuming it goes pretty far, since what Kenjaku is saying here is that it retroactively made it so that his curses didn't affect Takaba at all. And there's no rhyme or reason to it except that Takaba's ability just rewrote reality to favor him. And the ultra mega genius Kenjaku is even flabbergasted by this. He's never experienced anything like this before. So that goes back to what I was saying about how this is an anomaly in the jujitsu world, like truly a variant curse technique if there ever was one. And then the chapter ends with Takaba saying, in this world there's like a lot of things to be excited over. And the number one thing is when the nobody who's just there to fill space steals the room and gets massive laughter, right? And I think that's foreshadowing, because him saying getting massive laughter plays into his ability. And obviously Takaba, being a failed comedian, is always searching for that room-killing joke. And since he's terrible, only he will laugh at it, but that's the only thing that matters, because he only has to find humor in it for the ability to work. So whatever it is, it's really gonna wreck Kenjaku, I assume, or his plans in general. I don't think Takaba is going to completely take out Kenjaku here, because like I said previously, I think that's reserved for a Kotsu. So whatever Takaba does here, I think will make him look great. I just hope it doesn't wind up with him dying, because that would really suck. It's like, yeah, I get it, Gege. You're not afraid to kill off characters, and I respect it. But you have to kind of draw a line, and I think the line is at Takaba. Like, honestly, I'd rather a Kotsu die than a Takaba. I know that's blasphemous, and that's no slight against a Kotsu. I love the guy just as much as the rest of you, but Takaba needs to be protected. So this chapter opens up with a flashback of us seeing the sorcerers having a game plan meeting before Gojo fought Sukuna, where Angel posits that it would be a good idea to like just jump Kenjaku and take him out before Sukuna fights Gojo, because even if Gojo winds up defeating Sukuna or Sukuna just loses, it will all be for naught, because Kenjaku's plan of merging the population of Japan with Tengen and becoming that huge cursed monster thing would still happen regardless. So if they take out Kenjaku, they think that they can stop that. And that raises another question that Hikari brings up when he's like, well, didn't Kenjaku add the rule that when everyone in the Culling game dies besides Geto and Megumi, which is, Sukuna and Kenjaku, then the merger will begin? And Hikari's like, so what is there to worry about then? And Akotsu jumps in and he's like, if me and Hikari are still players, then Kenjaku won't be able to complete his goal, because, we'll just defeat Sukuna. And then, of course, that raises the question of like, wait, if Akotsu and Hikari teamed up on Sukuna, could they beat him? In my opinion, no way. There's just no chance that could happen. Maybe before we saw Sukuna fight Gojo, I would have thought it probably could have happened, or it would have been competitive. But at this point, the Sukuna that just wiped the floor with Kashimo at full power, pretty sure there's no way that Hikari and Akotsu could take him down. I mean, I'm not going to try to do some jujitsu math here, but Akotsu kind of struggled with Ryu, and Ryu was killed by Sukuna so bad that it upset me. So, yeah. But after more debating and conversating, Angel ultimately suggests that they send TAKABA after KENJAKU, because she feels that his curse technique, in theory, should be powerful enough to take him down. And she goes on to, like, explain his curse technique to them, and she says to not say to anyone what she's going to say, and even to TAKABA himself. And TAKABA's curse technique is if he thinks something is funny, or if he's certain it will be, it becomes reality. But he's also not aware of his own ability. So yeah, I guess it means that Angel thinks that this is enough of a wild card to take out KENJAKU, and it's not a bad plan, but to be honest, they probably all should have just jumped him like they said in the beginning. Because I have no doubt in my mind that everyone just in the beginning of this chapter could take down KENJAKU if they teamed up on him. Come on, you got Angel, Akotsu, Hakari, Meimei, and Kusakabe is kind of just a little bonus at that point, but Angel, Hakari, and Akotsu should be more than enough to take down KENJAKU. But as we know, they, ultimately didn't go with that, and they just sent TAKABA because this is in the past still. I'm not sure how far into the past, because in the previous chapter we saw KENJAKU and Hazanoki reacting to Sukuna killing Gojo, so I guess this is happening while Sukuna is fighting Kashimo, but I don't know how long either sequence is. So it's possible that by the end of this chapter, it could possibly be happening during the time we see Yuji and Higuruma encountering Sukuna. You know, that huge cliffhanger that still hasn't been addressed, and I'm thinking we're not going to come back to it for at least another 2 chapters. I also want to make a follow-up video about what's going on with Yuji's possible new technique or transformation, because we got some new images of what it looks like for him in this Jump release. Hopefully I can get that out on the weekend. But as we saw in the previous chapter, KENJAKU's curse spirit manipulation really isn't doing much to TAKABA. He could just negate anything that he's doing, essentially, because KENJAKU's like, it's rejecting my curse technique. And he immediately deduces that his curse technique must be creating a phenomenon, like through his literal imagination. And while KENJAKU is pretty surprised by this ability, he's not like as in awe of it as I am, because this is straight reality manipulation. Like, I don't know why KENJAKU isn't even like more excited about manipulating this ability, because KENJAKU essentially wants to manipulate reality anyway, but maybe at his own hands, and he doesn't want to have to rely on TAKABA's ability. I don't know, or maybe he just doesn't care about it. If KENJAKU is interested in an ability, he'll be very vocal about it, so I guess he just doesn't care. It's more of a novelty to him, I guess. But anyway, as this battle goes on, KENJAKU is just trying to get a read on TAKABA, because he's confused in more ways than one. And he's also like, no matter what the curse technique is, there's always hole, which is, I guess, true. And if anybody would know those holes, it's KENJAKU. He said he's lived for over 1,000 years. I'm pretty sure consistently. It's not like these other reincarnated sorcerers where they kind of just jumped 1,000 years to the future. It's implied that KENJAKU was just living that whole time, hopping from body to body. And it also makes me think like, okay, so then what is the hole in Limitless? I'm pretty sure there isn't one. It's just like a completely overpowered curse technique. I mean, it literally took the greatest sorcerer of all time to use like a Jujutsu AI along with another super powerful Shikigami, all teaming up on him at once to ultimately be able to take him down and figure out a way to stop his curse technique or just stop him in general. But KENJAKU, being the ultra genius mastermind jujitsu sorcerer that he is, actually saying jujitsu sorcerer is kind of funny. It's like saying sorcery sorcerer. But KENJAKU slowly but surely figures out what's going on with TAKABA, and all he had to do was just talk to him, because it seems like KENJAKU kind of knows that there's a chance that this guy is just straight up neurodivergent and he's not like a mastermind playing me here. And after a few pages, you come to see that KENJAKU is thinking that, yeah, TAKABA seems to be neurodivergent and he's probably not even fully aware of what his ability is, so I can use that to my advantage. And because KENJAKU is a genius, also a psychopath, but that's besides the point, he can easily outsmart TAKABA, and he has 1,000 years of the lexicon in his mind, along with, seemingly inherent charisma, I guess. It actually turns out that KENJAKU is a bad matchup for TAKABA and not the other way around, because KENJAKU easily sees through TAKABA's humor or lack thereof, which I'm sure most of us immediately got from TAKABA. He's a terrible comedian. I mean, calling him a comedian is a disservice to comedian. He's like the equivalent of like an Instagram reel comedian. Actually, they might even be better than Takaba. Not all of them, but the bar is pretty low. Because like none of his jokes have setups, and calling them dad jokes would even be a disservice to that. And from what I found, Gege has based Takaba off of a real-life Japanese comedian by the name of Takayuki Haranishi. That's actually where Takaba is getting his gorilla face thing from in this chapter. But I guess Takayuki was, I don't want to say he was a bad comic, but I guess he was the kind of comic that Takaba is trying to be. That's also where the whole thing with the pulling out the spine segment of this chapter comes from. I'm not going to get into it because it doesn't really matter. I think Gege's kind of amusing himself with this dialogue more than anything. And hey, I don't blame Gege. This is his magnum opus, so have some fun with it. He's kind of like Kenjaku in himself if you think about it. Also, another funny thing that happens in their exchange of dialogue here is Kenjaku like takes Takaba to like a producer studio, and he's like wearing director or producer clothes and like giving Takaba notes. I think he's able to do this because of his barrier abilities, because he kind of did something similar to this with Choso back in chapter 202 when he like created that movie theater for them to just have a entertaining display of exposition. And I guess he's doing the same thing here. Like Kenjaku can like just make genjutsus with his barrier techniques. And this all just falls into Kenjaku's plan of exposing Takaba and realizing that, oh yeah, if you're just not confident, you're basically powerless. And he just begins to beat down Takaba. But Takaba's still taking it. Like, despite his abilities not being on the offensive here, he's still just like a tank, which is crazy. Like, his ability is still passive somewhat. Or his inherent cursed energy is just super high as well. Like, he could be a Jujutsu genius the way that Higuruma is, possibly. Not just like the intellectual kind. Maybe just an athletic genius. But it comes to Takaba challenging Kenjaku to a if you laugh, you lose, between them making funny faces. And Takaba makes like the gorilla face, which of course is an homage to that Takayuki guy. But Kenjaku just one-ups him with like the kabuki brain face. And yeah, he makes Takaba laugh and he just whoops him up some more. And coming into the end of the chapter, we see Takaba like struggling. He's like, is Kenjaku funnier than me? And the answer is absolutely. And it's because like Kenjaku is legitimately a really funny character. Like even going back to like chapter 202 that I was just referencing with how he was able to make that movie theater for Choso. Like as I was rereading that, I legitimately laughed out loud because after Kenjaku like dispels the barrier with the movie theater, Choso's like, what do you want? And then Kenjaku turns to him, he's like, did I not just tell you? And also that chapter gives us more insight into like another reason why Kenjaku is merging Japan with Tengen to make like that big ultimate cursed spirit, because he's like, you know, what if that ends up looking like a funny face? You know, wouldn't that be hilarious? And it shows you just like, Kenjaku is a straight up psychopath, but he is funny and really smart too. Because like, if you think about it, it's like, it would be pretty funny if everything that wound up coming down to was just like some funny looking like curse. It's dark, but come on. But as Takaba is crawling away, he notices Hazunoki's dead body because, you know, Kenjaku killed him in the previous chapter. And this is kind of like the nail in the coffin for Takaba. Like his confidence is completely destroyed by that. And Kenjaku is like coming up on him and he's like, come on, laugh. You're a comedian, right? And Takaba's like, why am I a comedian again? And this is making me think that Takaba is very likely going to die. I don't want him to. I really like him, but no one is safe in this series, and I like it. I do think Takaba will do something of significance because Angel had the whole setup in the beginning of the chapter, you know, but he still might die afterwards. Maybe sacrificing himself or something. But I also wonder what is going to come of this, because like I said, this is happening in the past, technically. So that means that whatever has happened has already happened? It really ultimately depends on how this is lining up timeline-wise with Yuji and Higuruma going after Sukuna, because it's got to be within minutes of each other, I assume at this.
Alright, bear with me guys. So coming in from the previous chapter, we saw Takaba taking on Kenjaku. And it eventually got to the point of where where KENJAKU figured out what was going on with Takaba. He realized he is essentially manipulating reality with his curse technique through things that he personally finds funny. However, it is actually a detriment to himself since he's such an inept comic and he's not really aware of how his curse technique works anyway. And he winds up challenging KENJAKU to like a you laugh, you lose. And KENJAKU just annihilates him, of course, because he hits him with the Kabuki brain lift. Then he like literally hits him with like a right hook and basically breaks Takaba's will. Like has him questioning what he's even doing, questioning if he was even funny in the first place. Then he eventually comes across Hosanuki's dead body, you know, because he was killed by KENJAKU in that previous chapter. And then we see KENJAKU coming across him, essentially about to kill him too, and Takaba realizes that. And he's like, why did I ever become an entertainer? And then I guess his life starts to flash before his eyes in this moment, because coming into this chapter, we are going into his flashback, which takes up the majority of the chapter. And I'm not really going to go over this too much because I'm not really that interested in it. Before I break it down, let me just say that if you do follow my channel, you know that I usually say things like, I wish this character had a backstory, or I wish we went more into this character, or I wish we understood their motivations better, or just more about them. So I'm not upset that that ever happened. I always think that's usually a good thing. However, it doesn't mean that just anything should suffice, you know? And I just don't think Takaba's backstory is that interesting, and I don't think that this much panel time should be dedicated to it. For example, other culling game participants like Kashimo and Ryu, rest in peace, my boy, they got like, what, 2 or 3 panels maybe dedicated to their backstories, which was fine. We got the gist of what was going on with them. Maybe they didn't really need that depth to them. And I don't think Takaba needs that much as well, considering that he is just like a normal dude. I think, you know, just like a couple panels would have sufficed in us understanding like what was going on with him. But considering that Gege is giving Takaba way more screen time than I thought with this backstory, it could mean that he's going to be much more of a significant character than what we originally thought. And I think that's fine. But I just hope that Gege decides to give this much attention to the Heian era if we ever get that flashback, because it would be straight up like criminal if he goes this hard on Takaba and then like we never see like the Heian era stuff, at least extended. But fingers crossed, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get like a Heian era arc. But anyway, long story short, I guess we're going back to like Takaba's college years, because it says like an average university. So I guess he's like taking some kind of comedy class or creative writing or improv class. I don't know. He's doing something. I don't know how that stuff works in Japan. But he does have a friend with him. A friend that he honestly doesn't deserve. And the whole dichotomy here is that the friend is living like a normal college student life. He's going out, having fun, drinks, messing around with people romantically. And Takaba's not. Takaba's like a psycho. He's like crazy focused and dedicated on being a comedian, despite being absolutely terrible and having no talent at all. And he's like berating and putting down his friend for like trying to have a normal life and socialize and have fun and everything, and not like 100% dedicating himself to being a failed comic. And before I go further, let me just say that like I get the narrative here. I totally understand it. I'm sure this is like super common in Japan, especially with what happens to Takaba eventually, with him becoming like hikikomori kind of. And I'm not putting down the message here. I totally think that if you do have a dream or a passion or a desire, you should definitely go after it and just keep pursuing it. Because like, what else are you gonna do? Are you just gonna fall into being like a cog in the wheel? And there's like nothing wrong with that and being comfortable in your life and everything and just settling, but you know, that's just not for everybody, such as with the case with Takaba, even if you are delusional about it. But there has to be a point where you realize your limitations. Unfortunately, we are not Saiyans. We do have limits, despite what battle manga has told us throughout our lives. And it's okay to adjust your goals for maybe ones that are more realistic and less grandiose. As where Takaba did not do that. He just kept going, kept grinding, but aimlessly grinding. Grinding that gives you no progression. And we eventually see him, like I said, become a hikikomori, like a shut-in, never leaving his house. His apartment winds up looking like Togashi's fused with Saitama's. And, you know, we see the classic Pink Floyd time narrative here, where 10 years have gone by, or I'm assuming 10 years. We see like a PS3 here. I don't know, it could be like 2006 or something, or 2008. Maybe it's 10 years before the current time in the story, so Takaba's like 26 or something. I don't know. He realizes that can make people laugh, but it's eventually still getting him nowhere. And yeah, he becomes lonely as a result, and he eventually starts talking to like the younger version of himself in like this dream sequence where he says, I became a comedian because I wanted everyone to get to know me better. But he also has like this crazy, I want to be the Pirate King dream of making 100% of people laugh at a joke, which Gege is putting forth here that that's kind of impossible. And I get what he's saying, but like, to be honest, I don't think it's that uncommon to make every single person in a room laugh. Now, making them genuinely laugh, that's a different discussion. You know what I'm saying? Like, they can just laugh because it was infectious, or they laughed because they didn't want to be rude. So technically you can get 100 people out of a room to laugh, but I guess maybe he's putting forth genuinely, like making them actually laugh. I just still don't think it's as impossible as a task that Gege is putting forth here. But TAKABA also realizes that he wasn't confronting the laughs head on. Somewhere along the way, he stopped taking comedy seriously because he didn't want to get hurt. And that's another thing that a lot of us fall into. We don't want to take that risk. You know, we can keep hyping ourselves up in our mind, giving us that nice little dopamine hit that, yeah, we're gonna make it. I'm gonna have romance in my life, and I'm gonna make money, and I'm gonna stop procrastinating, I'm gonna stop being lazy. But then it's like, you don't want to take the risk because it's scary. And that's what's happened with TAKABA here. And having this realization, he finally comes back to reality here, facing off against KENJAKU, who, you know, was walking him down about to kill him. And he hits KENJAKU with, I guess, the perfect dogaza. Now, a dogaza is something that Japanese people do when they are like extremely sorry or filled with remorse. I don't know, Google it, but they like bow down, and it's like a big deal to them. Like, it really is a sign of like, they're not messing around. They're very serious about this. Like, you don't just casually dogaza. And TAKABA is doing like the ultimate dogaza, as to where he's essentially manipulating reality so that he can become a literal Fibonacci sequence. And we see that this display is affecting KENJAKU and making him alter his own thoughts. Or he's like, what stellar form, true prostration. It took me until my late 20s to reach such a level. So wait, what am I saying? And that's the first time we've ever seen KENJAKU get psyched out like that in his own mind. It's one thing that we saw before with him getting like confused and a little psyched out by TAKABA's abilities initially, but we've never seen his inner monologue being altered. So this is just further showing how powerful TAKABA can really be. Like, if he had full control over his powers, I'm pretty sure he can end the series. And I'm not even joking. Just think about it. But we can't get that far because, you know, then the series would be over. So he kind of has to lose here, or whatever is going to happen, because he agrees with what KENJAKU's criticisms were before. When he's like, you know what, you're right. I should take everyone in consideration. Because before he would say, I don't care if you don't think it's funny as an individual, it only matters if everyone else does. And he's like, you know what, you're right. I shouldn't think like that. But however, I'm not going to stop thinking that I should make 100 out of 100 people laugh. I don't care if I'm stubborn, I'm going to do it because I'm going to become the Hokage. No, but what he actually says is, which is why I'll make you laugh so hard you puke your guts up. That's my brand of comedy. And KENJAKU's like, oh, all right, let's see you try, big boy. And I'm thinking that this is literally going to happen, right? TAKABA declaring this and considering that he has the ability to do essentially whatever he wants, I guess this is going to happen. And what is the result of that? Not really sure. I don't think it's going to kill KENJAKU. I'm sure he has thousands of ways that he can heal himself, not just through reverse curse technique. I'm sure he can use the curses that he has through Geto's ability to, you know, help him with gut spilling. But I don't know why I feel this way. I have no evidence to support this. I have nothing. It's just like a gut feeling. I don't know why I feel it, but it's possible that KENJAKU like takes over TAKABA's body and that's like his new vessel. And then he just starts using TAKABA's ability. And I know that conflicts with like what I said previously about how TAKABA in theory could end the series. So for sure, if KENJAKU had a grip on that, then he would surely end the series, because I don't think anybody would be able to stop that ability. I guess with domain amplification, you could fight against this for sure, right? Because that's like the hockey of JJK. You can just shut down devil fruit ability or curse techniques with that. So you would have to come prepared. You'd have to know who you're facing and that they have this comedian ability. And then I guess you would just destroy them. I mean, if you were strong enough. So it's kind of like, you got to know. So it's not impossible, but it just makes me think back to when Kenjaku was talking about, like, you know, that big curse amalgamation that he's going to make with a fusion of Tengen and all the people in Japan. Like, he was like, wouldn't it be funny if it had a goofy face? And it's like, are you a freaking comedian, Kenjaku? I mean, you are funny and pretty charismatic, but are you a freaking comedian? I don't know. But I'm not sure what's going to happen with Takaba here. I hope he doesn't die. I mean, I would be pissed if he dies simply because we had to go through this chapter. It's like, we got to sit through his backstory just for him to die, which Gege totally could do, but I guess he's not going to. I'm pretty sure he's going to live at this point. I don't think he's going to kill Kenjaku, because obviously Kenjaku is probably going to get killed by Akotsu or, you know, in 50 chapters or whatever. But
so we're continuing the fight between Kenjaku and Takaba here, and it seems like Takaba has gained his second win, because, you know, at the end of the previous chapter he was nearly defeated, but then he screamed his Shonen MC goal, and it brings us to this chapter where Kenjaku is summoning a special grade curse, you know, through Geto's curse spirit manipulation. I don't know how powerful this thing is. It doesn't really matter because it's literally being one-shotted by Takaba, who can like manifest this truck with his ability, Comedian, where, just in case you're a newcomer or you forget, but anything that Takaba thinks is funny, he can essentially manifest it. But he's like somehow unaware of it too, and we'll get into that later. But this just shows how incredibly powerful Takaba really is. I mean, obviously his reality manipulation is unlike any other ability that we've seen in the series, but the fact that it packs a punch too. This is a special grade. It's not like everybody just one-shots these things. Only the guys at the top of the power scale are really capable of doing this. And I'm not sure if Kenjaku's getting hit by this or if he's narrowly dodging it. I mean, you could say that he's getting hit here, or maybe he's not, but it ultimately could go into what he says at the end of the chapter about accumulating damage, which we'll talk about. But also the fact that Kenjaku still has like a bunch of special grade curses just chilling in his chamber, I guess, of curse spirit manipulation. I think he says an exact number of how many he has left. It's like a couple chapters back. To be honest, I don't really remember. I'm sure somebody in the comments will let us know, but it's like 5 or 6 or something. I think he said something like that, or maybe I'm wrong, but I just hope that he still has some left in there that are like groundbreakingly powerful, such as like Michizane Sugawara. Now that's not confirmed. We don't know if he's even still a thing, to be honest, but this individual was mentioned by Gojo when he was talking to Akotsu, because apparently he is their common ancestor, and he eventually became like one of the big 3 vengeful cursed spirits, meaning that like he's equivalent to Rika essentially, or in that same tier, because I'm pretty sure she's one of the other 3, right? So I'm just hoping that Kenjaku has him, or he's just still out there so that, you know, the other sorcerers have somebody substantial to fight, because we're really lacking opponents. Unless everybody just gangs up on Sukuna, which is cool, but like, come on, give people their other individual fights. It's one of the things we love about shonen battle manga. But I digress. Let's get back into the craziness of this chapter, because Gege has gone full-blown Bobobo. I mean, the whole title of the chapter with Stupid Survivor, or, you know, Baka Survivor, it's in reference to the opening of the Bobobo anime. And Bobobo is like a nonsensical shonen. Like, if you're familiar with Gintama, it's even more unhinged than that. It's actually a really funny, good show. It's lighthearted, the stakes aren't really that high. It's kind of like a bag of Doritos. You're gonna have a good time, and you don't really have to worry too much about it. And I think Gege almost invented Takaba just so he has an excuse to make these couple chapters, so he can just go all out, unhinged. Any kind of like funny ideas that he had, he's just letting it go in this chapter, because this is by far the most different fight in the entire series, because we're seeing a collection of like non sequitur sequences in a very Japanese comedic style, I guess you could say, where we just go through like this dream sequence like montage of Kenjaku and Takaba
I don't know, like going through skits where they're becoming characters and then suddenly they're just not, and then suddenly they're doing an homage to, I think, Pokemon here with I Choose You Defibrillator. Team Rocket's blasting off again, like this stuff, and then them trying to bring this fish back to life. If you're reading this chapter, you already know what I'm talking about, and you're probably thinking something similar to me. But it ultimately comes to a point in one of these odd comedic sequences where KENJAKU is a woman. Like, not like, you know, in drag. He's like, looks like he's a full-blown woman at this point. And of course, this is from TAKABA's reality manipulation, but I also think that this could be a little hint from Gege that KENJAKU is like inherently a woman. And I think that would be a pretty cool twist. I mean, we've already seen that he is willing to inhabit the body of a woman so that his plans can come to fruition. You know, like he inhabited the body of the sorcerer named Kaori, who wound up being Yuji's mother, or at least the person of the body who gave birth to him. Technically, you know, all things considered, KENJAKU is Yuji's mom and dad. I don't know. It'll be explained later, hopefully. I mean, Yuji has to find out sooner or later, right? But after some more back and forth, KENJAKU and TAKABA come to like a rock, paper, scissors match where they both are just like sticking their fingers in each other's noses. And KENJAKU comes to the realization that TAKABA's curse technique is not just manipulating or materializing his own individual imagination. It also affects KENJAKU's, which is something that we didn't know before. And then going even more into that, he says, if you will, the resonance of the soul. So that means TAKABA's curse technique is manipulating freaking souls. And, you know, we've been talking about this for a while now. Whenever the soul comes up in Jujutsu Kaisen, it is serious business. It's like the highest level that you can get at this point, I suppose, right? I mean, cursed energy manipulation and all that stuff is cool, but if you can get to the soul, it's game over. No one can stop that stuff. Or at least so far that we've seen. And I'm pretty sure as the series goes on, at least before it's over, we'll get a full understanding of what the soul is, and I'm sure it has something to do with cursed energy and jujitsu and all that stuff. I assume that, you know, since the soul is a part of the human, it's always been around, and then maybe cursed energy came after the fact. We still don't know when cursed energy first came out, or if there was a patient zero, or if it was always a thing. Also, don't hold your breath on that. It's possible Gege may never explain it. We're kind of just led to believe it's just a thing, and it's just, hey, that's just how it is. But it also makes me wonder, like, so now that KENJAKU knows this, I suppose he's not able to use this ability to his full advantage. I mean, we do see him try to counteract TAKABA in these sequences, but it's ultimately for naught because TAKABA just brute forces over him. And then that leads me to think, why doesn't KENJAKU just go ham on him? Why doesn't he just activate his domain expansion like he did against Tsukumo, or at least use his gravity manipulation curse technique, which he got from Kaori, the woman that we were talking about that technically gave birth to Yuji? But he's just been fighting TAKABA very conservatively. I don't think he's necessarily underestimating him, but maybe he just thinks he can defeat him without having to go down those routes, which seems likely considering what is going to happen. But after they go through this whole like question game show sequence and another thing where they have to run through these doors, it suddenly winds up with KENJAKU becoming a black cat crossing the street, but it's about to get hit by a car, so TAKABA saves him, but it actually is KENJAKU. And then TAKABA hits him with the reverse Uno card, becoming like a anthropomorphized cat version of himself, but he's acting like he's drowning in the water. And then KENJAKU feels compelled to save him, but then he's also tricking him like he was tricked before, and he starts riding a jet ski and hits KENJAKU with the jet ski. And then they just get into a sequence where they're like splashing water on each other, and KENJAKU, like, I'm thinking he's getting like real here, where he's like, this is fun. Like, how many hundreds of years has it been since I've had this much fun? Like, I'm glad I made the culling games. And I think this is like genuine internal monologue from KENJAKU, like almost similar to like being drunk or something. Like, TAKABA's curse technique is making him more vulnerable, I suppose. And I guess this is true. He's lived for over 1,000 years at this point. So having pure, genuine fun like this is probably difficult. That's why he's all crazy and stuff, and he thinks merging all of Japan with Tengen and making a massive, uncontrollable cursed spirit is interesting to him. It's because he's a 1,000-year-old psychopath. And he's also brilliant, of course. That doesn't really help, but anyway, Kenjaku kind of snaps out of it. He realizes what's going on here. And then he just starts trying to drown Takaba. This is such a funny sequence. I don't know why. Because he's just laughing and then suddenly like, oh, wait. And then he's just drowning him. And of course, this isn't going to work because he's still in like Takaba's world at this point, and the water turns out to be just Fanta. And even as Kenjaku's continuing to have like a good time here, he's like, I'm eventually going to lose if this keeps going on. Like, all of these situations are just a simulation to him, but to me, I'm actually taking this damage here, and it will accumulate. And in the spoilers yesterday, it said that he'll eventually die, but I don't know what the real translation is here, but it just ultimately is coming to the point of where Kenjaku knows that he'll lose if he doesn't snap out of this sooner or later. And also him saying, you know, to Takaba, these are all just simulations. And it makes me wonder, like, what does Takaba think is happening here? Because the original exposition that we got on his curse technique was that he's clueless to it. So what does that mean? Does it mean that he doesn't even know that he has this curse technique, or he does know, but he doesn't know how to make it work? So he kind of just goes into this weird fugue state of bad comedy, or he's just that unself-aware of things that he's just fine with reality literally being warped before his eyes. But I digress again. We're coming to the ending sequence of this chapter where, you know, after we just talked about Kenjaku realizing that he's going to lose if he doesn't figure out a way to get out of this, because he says it won't end until Takaba's comedic desire is satisfied. And it's like, I can't beat him with violence. He essentially has to outsmart him, which you'd think wouldn't be that difficult since Kenjaku has been trying to do it, but he's kind of been failing, to be honest. But I guess that he's coming to his final gambit here, where him and Takaba are suddenly wearing suits and they're in front of like an audience. And I would have normally said that, oh, I guess this is like maybe Kenjaku doing his barrier ability where he can like make a genjutsu out of it. Like we saw that he created like a movie theater for Choso a couple chapters back to just give him a bunch of exposition, but maybe this is just Kenjaku using Takaba's own ability here, you know, since we just found out that he can manipulate his own imagination as well. So maybe he's using Takaba's own ability against him within the bounds that it is allowed, you know, like he can come up with a situation where they're both on stage and having to perform in front of this crowd, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Takaba has to be subservient to it, if that makes sense. He'll just play along because this is what Takaba ultimately wants. He wants to be a stand-up comedian like this and make, you know, 10 out of 10 people in the audience laugh. And the final narration that we get here says the two are out on the stage at the deciding battle. So it's possible that they're going to go like joke for joke or something. And then if Kenjaku defeats him with the audience, you know, laughing more at his jokes or whatever, then I guess that is how he defeats Takaba and breaks his curse technique. So this chapter marks the ending of Kenjaku versus Takaba as we see them both take stage for one final comedy act. This is of course made possible by Takaba's curse technique comedian, which essentially allows him to manipulate reality through his own imagination and the freaking imagination of his opponent, in this case Kenjaku's, if he thinks something is funny. And yeah, it can go this far, manifesting an entire audience and like a theater as well. An audience seemingly with their own individual personalities. This goes pretty far, but I'll spare you the details and the long sequence that we have here of them doing this improv conversational comedy act. I mean, you've read the chapter for yourself, but I'll just go into what I think is the important stuff being said here, or at least I hope it is, and none of this is just all for naught, if that makes sense. So Takaba eventually asks Kenjaku in this whole stand-up act thing if he's heard about Momotaro's tale, and Kenjaku says, "No, I don't know it. I'm the son of a single mother and my mother was always busy." But then he immediately contradicts that and says that his mom was nice and always actually read him stories such as Momotaro's tale. So this could be the truth, or either Kenjaku is just saying this as a part of the act. If it is true, it means that Kenjaku is a male, or at least was born a male, since he says I'm the son of a single mother, and that means that Kenjaku had a single mother, and I I guess his father was out of the picture or something. And she was either busy or not. Again, it possibly doesn't even matter because we might not even go more into Kenjaku's backstory considering what happens at the end of the chapter. But I think the important thing here, aside from that, is the tale of Momotaro, because it's brought up multiple times in this sequence. And let me just go over quickly what it is. So it's this old Japanese folklore about a boy who was born from a giant peach, and he was found floating down a river by an old childless woman along with her husband. And he was basically like a beast. Like at the age of 5, he was able to cut down like a big tree with an old knife. And as he got older, he left his parents to go fight a bunch of demons. And along the way, he befriended a talking dog, a monkey, and a pheasant. And then eventually he goes to Onigashima, and don't worry, if that sparked something in your mind, I'm gonna get back to it. Eventually beats them all and then takes the demon chief as captive. Now, like I said, Onigashima, if you're familiar with that, it's because you've read One Piece and or are reading it. That's because Oda, the creator of One Piece, used the story of Momotaro for quite a few aspects of the Wano arc, including characters in it, such as like Odin and his son Momonosuke. And it's possible that Gege is also using elements of the Momotaro story in Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, I'm not too sure about this because I don't know Japanese, obviously. But it's possible that in this instance, Momotaro could be Yuji? Because also later on, Kenjaku says maybe the truth is that Momotaro was made by his grandmother and grandfather, copulating after they rejuvenated by eating the peach that Momotaro was allegedly born out of. Now, we know that that's not literally the case with Yuji, since we know that he was born of Kenjaku inhabiting the body of a sorcerer named Kaori, along with Yuji's father, who seems to just be ordinary for the most part. I don't know. But the fact that he's bringing up grandmother and grandfather here, I think is probably important because we know, going back to chapter 1, Yuji's grandfather was kind of important, and he still kind of is, because he knew something about Yuji, but he didn't want to tell him, or Yuji just didn't want to hear it. And Yuji eventually does, obviously, go on to fight demons, or the cursed spirits. And as for him befriending a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant, I don't know who this is analogous to. I mean, I think it probably could go into the names. I mean, if you understand Japanese and the nuances of it, you could probably break down some of the names of the characters in the series and figure out like who's the monkey, the pheasant, and the dog. Because in like One Piece, for example, the admirals are named after the monkey, the dog, and the pheasant. Like we have Kizaru, Akainu, and Aokiji. Yellow monkey, red dog, and blue pheasant. So in Jujutsu Kaisen, I don't know who the names of the characters are that could relate to this, if this is a thing, or it could be more symbolic. Like for example, monkey, I think that could be Maki, if anyone, because she's supposed to be the new Toji, right? And Toji referred to himself as a monkey. And that's, of course, because that parallels to Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. And more so, Sun Wukong taking on Buddha. And in Jujutsu Kaisen, Gojo is essentially Buddha. Because the whole I alone am the honored one, that's like Buddha's iconic line. And I'm pretty sure that's what he said before he like squashed Sun Wukong, which is of course right before Gojo squashed Toji. So maybe Maki is a monkey. And as for who the dog and the pheasant are, I guess Megumi and Nobara maybe? I don't know. I'm sure somebody in the comments knows. So if you are that person and you can let us know, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Or maybe I'm just thinking way too much into this and I'm just hoping that all of this is just not a nonsensical sequence, because maybe in Japanese or to the Japanese readers, this sequence is funny. But, to an American like myself, it's kind of just like, okay. But it starts to go off the rails for sure, because by the end of this sequence, we have Kenjaku literally talking about throwing aerial fecal balls. But as we come to the end, Takaba is like, I was thinking that it's just about to finish the stage I dreamed of. Like, I don't want this to end, because this is essentially what Takaba always wanted. To be a comedian, but also have this big grand performance where he's able to make every single person in the audience laugh. Like a 100% laughter rate, which he thought was essentially impossible, but, given that it's his Shonen MC goal, it of course is possible. Even just by my own opinion of it, but that's besides the point. But it's also kind of tragic because this is all not real. The only one that is truly experiencing this is Takaba and Kenjaku. And even to a lesser extent, it's kind of just Takaba because Kenjaku is kind of like under a spell at this point, to be honest. I mean, he's aware of what's going on, but at the same time, he is kind of like trapped in this world that Takaba has created. And as the performance ends, Takaba's like, that's enough. And then they snap out of it and they come back to reality, and Takaba's just laying there with like this white robe, which I think is like a burial ceremonial robe or something that Japanese people use. And it makes you think like, oh, does Takaba now have control over his curse technique? Or did he always? We're gonna need another narrator to come in and give us some more exposition on that, which we're probably not gonna get. But anyway, Takaba thanks Kenjaku, and Kenjaku's like, you were really funny. And it's like, I assume to be a genuine moment from Kenjaku here, which is nice. Because in the next panel, he gets his freaking head cut off by a Kotsu. That's right. This was all a big ruse to set up this one moment for a Kotsu to cut off Kenjaku's head. Now, let's rewind a little bit, because this is supposed to be crazy and out of left field and shocking, but it does make sense. So as I've said before, there's so much information that happened in about 1 month span time that only happened in about 2 or 3 pages right before Gojo fought Sukuna that we're just not privy to, and we're still not. But apparently during that time, they came up with this big elaborate plan to have Takaba fight against Kenjaku, suck him into this comedian reality. And in that reality, he essentially isn't able to sense anything, not even a Kotsu's massive cursed energy. Because, you know, otherwise, if they were just out there normally in the world, a Kotsu could never get close to Kenjaku because he would sense him from like miles away probably. Also, another little interesting thing here is that in the last seconds before he gets his head cut off, Kenjaku does of course realize that a Kotsu's there, and he immediately activates his curse technique reversal for his gravity technique, which he got from Kaori, the woman that we were talking about that gave birth to Yuji, or when Kenjaku was in her body. But he's using the reverse application of that. This is very, very rare. Like, we've only seen, Gojo and like 2 other characters, I think, use the reversal of their curse technique, because Kaori's technique is just like gravity, but the reverse application of it is anti-gravity. So I assume he would just make a Kotsu float or something, but it is all for naught because he's not fast enough and he just literally gets his freaking head cut off by a Kotsu. What an incredible, crazy twist sequence here. Now, where was Akotsu? It doesn't really matter. I mean, we know that he was with the group who was observing Gojo versus Sukuna, of course. And then after that, you know, all hell broke loose and we weren't really able to account for where everybody went. And as Kenjaku is dying here, or having his head cut off, he realizes that, oh, Takaba didn't want to be interrupted. Like, he wanted to have this full moment with Kenjaku where he had this big final comedy act. And he waited until the very end for Akotsu to come in to cut his freaking head off. Which is, you know, cool. Down with it. And as Kenjaku's head is on the ground, he's like, you had this plan the whole time? And Akotsu's like, yeah, Takaba can't kill people. And that makes me wonder, like, does that mean that Takaba doesn't want to kill people, you know, because of like a moral thing? Or that his curse technique simply cannot kill people? I mean, it definitely can kill, since we saw that it killed that special grade cursed spirit in the last chapter. But maybe he can't kill humans with it. Not really sure. Typical Gege ambiguous non-speak here. But I think that would probably balance the curse technique if he can't kill people, but he could just manipulate reality by using both his and their imaginations. But this also makes me think that, like, so if this was all a part of the plan, then what else was a part of the plan? Was Gojo dying a part of the plan? And I know some of you are getting excited, some of you are getting angry hearing that. It's such a polarizing topic. If you're curious about Gojo possibly coming back, I'm gonna link a video at the end of this video. I made one going all over the possibilities, but I didn't talk about this in there because there was no way to know. But it makes you wonder, like, did they want Sukuna to kill Gojo to lull him into a false sense of security so that he would leave Megumi's body, go into his true form, and then I guess it has something to do with Higuruma and Yuji going after Sukuna, because it was like instant. After Sukuna killed Kashimo, they were just on him. And it seems obviously like it was planned to be that way. Now, again, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up saying that it's guaranteed Gojo is coming back, because I don't think it's guaranteed. I really do genuinely think it's like 50-50 at this point, which is great because it could have been less percentage than that. But anyway, coming to the end of the chapter here, Kenjaku's like, is that so? I was halfway. What a shame. But my will be inherited. So what does that mean? Well, I mean, I just assume it means that someone is going to finish Kenjaku's plan of merging the population of Japan with Tengen and his barrier and creating like this big ultimate world-ending curse spirit abomination thing. Now, who is going to inherit the will? Could be Urarame, could be freaking Sukuna, could be Yuji. Yuji is not off the table for being way more important than we think he is. Remember, it goes back to the story of Momotaro. Even though that doesn't really coincide with Kenjaku's plan here, he still did say, like, I don't know, like a year or two ago, that Yuji was like the eye of the storm. As long as he and Sukuna exist, there's always going to be like this big struggle or whatever. I'm paraphrasing, but some of you psycho hardcores out there know what I'm talking about. Also, going back to the story of Momotaro, remember when we said that he did defeat the demons with his friends, and then they captured the demon chief and they plundered his treasure? Maybe that's what's going to happen here. Maybe Akotsu captures Kenjaku because he cut his head off, but you know, Kenjaku can live as just a head because ostensibly he's just a brain, right? I mean, maybe he needs a full body to survive, but it doesn't seem that way. It's very possible that Akotsu is just going to take Kenjaku as a head and then just use him, you know, because like, why not? And it was also revealed by Kenjaku at the beginning of his fight with Takaba that, at least when he was killing Hozunuki, that you can't activate reverse curse technique from the neck down. So like if your head is severed or if you're, you know, stabbed through the neck the way that Hozunuki was, you can't activate reverse curse technique. So Kenjaku is kind of just like a sitting duck here. And it could go back to that trope of, you know, having like a talking head on your travels. Like if you watch the One Piece Netflix series, you'll probably remember when they had Buggy as just a head and talking, you know? I'm thinking it could be something like that because it's way too soon for Kenjaku to die. And I know we're like 243 chapters into the series, but there's still so much Kenjaku needs to say and reveal. And we also need like his Heian era flashback. So I'm hoping best case scenario is that Akotsu just takes Kenjaku's head and then just keeps him around. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one, guys. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. And if you liked the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.